Welcome to Dr. Rebecca's Let's Talk Horses. May the force of the horse be with you podcast show, hosted by Dr. Rebecca Wara-Goss. In this podcast, we discuss all things horse-related, especially in mental health, research, human-animal bond, and the helping industries nationally and internationally, and explore the phenomenon of the horse-human connection.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Rebecca with Let's Talk Horses. May the force of the horse be with you, where we discuss all things horse-related, especially in the mental health, research, human-animal bond, and the helping industries nationally and internationally, and explore the phenomenon of the horse-human connection. Today, my very special guest is Kate Neligan. Kate is an equine-partnered life and professional coach, animal communicator, healer, and creator of Awakening with Equines. Kate pairs her intuitive gifts with those of horses to help people access their own inner power and connect to their life purpose. She has a master's in spiritual psychology and is certified in equine experiential education. Kate also has been a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, corporate marketing VP, and Huffington Post writer. In addition, Kate specializes in training equine-partnered coaches and educators through her certification program, Awakening with Equines. In private equine coaching sessions and workshops around the country, Kate facilitates powerful transformation by helping high-performing women to navigate life transitions with more ease, presence, and flow. She also supports companies in developing mindful cultures and communication skills through team building and leadership retreats. Kate's life is dedicated to the transformation that is possible through the power of the human-animal bond, and she shares this unconditional love and wisdom with the world. Welcome, Kate. I am so excited to have you here today on the show. Thank you for being here. How are you? And can you share with us a little about you, where you're from, what drew you to your profession, and what you do today?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. And I am based outside of Boulder, Colorado, in a small town called Longmont. And I work with people remotely and virtually as well. And I travel to people's ranches. I actually go back to Los Angeles pretty frequently to see clients. And let's see what drew me. So I've loved horses my whole life. I started riding when I was a kid, about 10. And I competed in college, took a little bit of time off. And then when I came to find out that horses were showing up in this incredible therapeutic environment, I was leasing an incredible Arabian in Malibu, California. And the woman who was running that ranch was doing equine therapy with addicts who were in rehab. And so I heard about what was happening and I needed to go watch it. And within 2 hours, I became addicted to what was happening with the human-animal bond and essentially how horses were showing up in this healing space with people. And I wanted to learn as much as possible. So I became an apprentice with my first mentor and volunteered for a couple of years and then started to do this work on my own.
Wonderful. Who was your mentor that helped guide
Yeah,
you?
I've had a couple different ones. I feel like I've been really lucky and blessed that the first mentor I had a background in Igala and also used to live and work with Carolyn Resnick. And so I had that Liberty training piece as well. And so I got to really see how to set up sessions and I was always taking notes. And I'm super grateful for my first mentor, who was Tally. And then I found my second mentor when that ranch closed and I went to a rescue ranch in Los Angeles. And I brought my first rescue horse, because they were going to put her down. I brought her to that rescue, and my second mentor, Esta, is also just been incredibly helpful. She was trained in Pirelli, and she also had Cynthia was a huge Liberty trainer that helped her as well. And so I got, again, different experiences from natural horsemanship and Liberty training. And Esta was also really well versed in animal communication and understanding the horses and how to respect them. So asking permission. And so I learned quite a bit from her as well. And then what happened is I went and studied a ton, like from all different teachers. And ultimately I was at a Liberty training with a pretty large Liberty trainer. And I heard my horse, because I have the ability to hear horses, like many of us do. And I heard her say, "Come to the barn right now." And I thought something was wrong. And I drove over there. I left this workshop I paid for, drove over there, and she's like, "You're to learn from me now." And so my true mentor is always the horse. And my first rescue, she really was the one who taught me the most. So she said, "Enough learning from the humans. They have limited knowledge about horses. You might as well come directly to us, directly to the horse's
Wow.
mouth." Yeah.
Wow, that is so profound.
Yeah. So she taught me quite a bit about Liberty, and it has nothing to do with the formula. And it has none of this work actually in the horses healing human space has anything to do with a formula or a specific way of doing things. It's really about a way of being with animals and to be able to deeply understand them and give them really the permission to show up with their highest gifts. And so I needed to learn from the horses for quite a while, and I still do. All of my horses are teachers, and even horses that are not mine, and I work with other people's horses, I've learned so much from. So they are truly my mentors now. And I'm very grateful that I had some different human mentors, because I saw very different perspectives. One of my mentors was very human centric. The other one was very horse centric. And then I was able to kind of take those two different perspectives and really find mine, which is about equals, like we're equals with horses, and how do I really balance the needs of the human and the needs of the horses and respect both?
Mm-hmm. Wow, absolutely. And I wanted I'll come back to this in just a moment because it's so amazing. And I just wanted to circle back just for our listeners who may not be aware of what Igala is, or Pirelli, or Liberty. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about
Sure.
what those are?
Yeah, and even to back it up one step further, so being in the
Sure.
equine, I call myself an equine partnered coach. And
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of terminology. There's equine assisted learning, equine assisted psychotherapy, there's equine guided. There's a lot of different philosophies or trainers that have kind of put their own terminology, and mine is equine partnered because I really feel like they are partners. And then there's a lot of different trainers in different spaces. So Liberty is without tack, usually total freedom in an enclosed area where a human and horse are interacting together and essentially joining up in whether it's different tricks or activities. And there's Liberty riding without tack, and there's also Liberty groundwork. Pirelli is a form of what they termed natural horsemanship. They have different Pirelli games. There's different ways where it was essentially about how do you listen to the horse. So that was a piece of my education in early days. And let's see, what was the other one that I mentioned there?
Igala.
EGALA, yeah. So equine assisted growth and learning is what that stands for. One of the early creators of the equine assisted space, which is how do you have, for them specifically, an equine specialist and a mental health practitioner partnered together to access and assess what's going on with a horse and how that's shown, what that's showing up for the client. So it is essentially like therapy in an arena with horses, and with the horses being facilitators as well as the therapist and the equine specialist. So my work's a little different in the sense that I do a lot of animal communication in my coaching work. I do energy healing. The horses are doing energy work on humans. I bring that in. And I bring in a lot of what I would call like the higher wisdom teachings around ways of beings, emotional intelligence skills. So these kind of soft skills that we find hard to put words to, like trust and compassion. And it really is about, the intention is about awakening, which is definitely more about loyalty to your soul than really about like ego pursuit of just wanting, wanting more money, more whatever. All of that is great. And a lot of my work is about kind of higher concepts in this awakening process that's much more soul led.
I love hearing that. That's beautiful. So, awakening, you consider loyalty to your soul.
Yes. And those words I have to attribute to the professors of my master's program, the Hallnicks. They wrote a book called Loyalty to Your Soul. And so
Okay.
that is really where I will take that from. Great book, really giving the principles of spiritual psychology, which is what they teach in that master's program. And now it's a certification program instead. But yes, it is much more about really what is our calling, why are we here, what's our purpose, how we can make a meaningful contribution on the planet, and who are we, and that we're divine beings having a human experience. Horses are divine beings having a horse experience, and how do we partner to learn from them, truly, because I believe they kind of hold the key and the map to ways of being that humans can learn a lot from, because the horses aren't as egocentric as humans are.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And then coming back to where you shared about being an animal communicator,
Mm-hmm.
and it's how you did describe, quite a few aspects of what that meant for you. Do you mind helping kind of define what an animal communicator might mean, or the
Sure.
different elements to that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like animal communication is an ability that we all have. It's just whether we are in tune with it. And essentially, there's different ways we receive information. We can be clairaudient and hear messages. We can be clairsentient and feel messages. There's essentially, they call it the different clairs of ways of receiving intuitive information. And horses do a lot with mental telepathy. They have images usually that they communicate with. And so essentially, just like you and I are talking right now, but we're verbal, most people read horses in the equine assisted world through body language, which is powerful and important.
Right?
And if we believe they're sentient beings, which they are, and we believe that they have emotions and we believe that they have intelligence, then we can also believe that they communicate and that we can hear words that they're saying or see images that they're sending. And so there's different ways to get trained in animal communication to grow the skill set. And really, it's growing intuition. And then to me, I feel like that's what honors the horses the most, is when we're actually asking them, do you want to be in this session? What do you think about this client? What would you say to this client? So it gives them a voice, which to me is really important, because I feel like, we're not using them. That's one of the things that I find frustrating in our field, is that, they're not yoga mats, they are not obstacle courses, they are not tools, they are really their own being. They're very different from dogs. They're really a specialized partner in this field. So why not talk to them like they're your colleague, or they're your, I
Mm-hmm.
often call them my CEO. I work for them. So
Uh-huh.
yeah.
That's beautiful. It's making sure that your equine partner is a willing participant and helping to co-lead, and you're receiving that equine consent.
Yes.
And I think that's so important when you're working with clients who are struggling, or they're coming to you for healing. And let me clarify too, do you do both, where you're helping to train a practitioner in their gifts to help others, or do you also help clients as the practitioner with their goals and what they're needing support in?
Yeah, so
If that makes sense.
my practice really started working with women who are in some form of transition, not necessarily, with horses at all, just the general public, often corporate women who are wanting to slow down, to become more present, work on their leadership and their emotional intelligence, all of it really boiling down to self-love. And what's happened in the last couple of years is that equine practitioners, so those who are wanting to learn animal communication, wanting to be equine coaches, equine therapists, have found me and asked me to help them mostly with their marketing and their business building, and to teach them how to be better coaches and practitioners. And as always, business is a spiritual practice, the way a relationship or anything else in our life is. And so we are always going to do the inner work as well, because I find that people often have issues around like confidence, the courage to start a practice, and there's self-doubt that can come up when we're starting something new. So we are doing both inner and outer work when I work with other equine practitioners as well.
Okay, yeah. And so I'm just trying to think of where your clients are coming to learn about how to help others, and also, of course, learn in deep aspects about themselves. And it sounds like perhaps their growth and learning that they have with your help and facilitation is what they're going to be able to pass on to their clients, their future clients. And so it seems that making sure that they understand, I guess we say blocks, right? Or like psychic blocks or spiritual blocks or growth or fear, anxiety, things like that, that really being able to work through that allows them to become a more, the word I'm using is like whole-bodied, centered person, to be able to be present.
Totally.
And I think where I'm trying to connect that to is this idea of ensuring that your equine partner is consensual in that process. Right? I think that's so important. It's like asking permission for this other being to be there with their energy that's being utilized in some way, and pairing that with them and where they're at, right? And having that alignment, I think, is so important to have that integrity, ethics, whatever you want to call around that. It's important.
Yeah. And it's very much about congruency, right? So if you want your clients to trust you, do you trust yourself? Do you trust the horses? Are the horses trusting you? Like, where is that culture of trust in sessions? And so, the belief system that I've always bought into in the work is how you do one thing is how you might do anything. So how you approach a horse might be how you approach a partner or a new opportunity. And if we have trust issues in one area, they can kind of bubble into another. And so what we're practicing in an arena gets directly applied out into life or into business, because I'm drawing those correlations between how can you take this back to your relationship, right? That you just saw this dynamic happen between you and a horse. Now, how do you bring that back? And a lot of it for me in coaching, which is different from therapy, is how do you find solutions in real time that change the present moment and also start to predict and change your future, because you're working on embodied solutions. And it's not as much, although I've done quite a bit of this myself, processing the past, right? And releasing stuff from the past. It's really more about, can we get clear this is or isn't working for you? Are you willing to make a new choice in this moment? Are you willing to see how the horse might do it? And can you bring that forward in your life as a new solution?
Wow. And how long, I guess I'm calling them clients. I don't know if you probably say that too, or probably guests or participants who come to work with you and train with you. How long does it usually take? I'm sure they're all different with their abilities to get to the goals they're looking for or wanting. I'm just curious, how long does this usually take, or the process?
Well, one of my favorite things is when people come and I get feedback about how fast the change is, because, we've talked about this in the space. It's, one session with a horse might be equivalent to like a year of therapy, which is, I would love for us to all be able to have that feedback from our clients that we all collect and put in one place. What did a client say? So I had a client tell me once that 1 2-hour session with himself and another client was equivalent to the 2 years in the master's program that we both did. And I was like, wow. He said, this was just as powerful. And I got as much change and as much learning and awareness that I did in 2 years. I'm like, that's huge. And then I saw another client create massive change after one. She was in a group workshop with like 3 other people for 3 hours. And she came back. She ended up then doing privates, but she came back. And the next time, I'm like, what have you been doing differently? You look different. You're glowing. You're happy. And she's like, nothing besides this. And I'm like, wow. So and she changed rapidly from being unhappy with her job, not being promoted, single, wanting to have a kid, to like very quickly changing all of that rapidly and being in a relationship. And she attributes it to that first session where we did deeper kind of inner child work, really, and around self-love, and shifted quite a bit. She didn't even think she liked horses, and then left having a horse on her phone as the wallpaper, and even like giving up meat. So things can change so fast with this work. And I always say it creates a lot of awe, because it does, because you never know. And then there are times where if people aren't willing to do the work, and this in your work, you can do as much as possible, but we cannot change anyone for themselves. They have to be ready for it. And there are times I've had a client even recently, it was like 3 or 4 sessions, and it's like not willing to change. And I'm like, I'm not the best fit for that person, because my favorite thing is to witness transformation and to be there for that change and hold space for it, really safe space, so that people feel like they can change. So I probably won't, and I have in the past let go of clients who aren't willing to change, because it's not going to serve either of us.
Out of curiosity, and then so before I say this, it's absolutely right. I mean, in order for a client who's looking for healing, whether it's in mental health counseling, or they could be on the other side, right, where they're the therapist wanting to become a therapist, right? So they learn how to become a healer. They have to learn how to heal first, right? How can you help someone if you don't know how to help yourself, kind of thing? So, I shared with you earlier, I'm a mental health professional myself, right? So I have clients that I do mental health treatment with.
Yes.
And it's so true, where clients that are ready, either because they've already had therapy before, and so they come back and they're ready this time, kind of thing, or they're just really open to the process. It does tend to feel smoother, faster, and feels like you get results, right? Or we won't say results, but meet goals, all those big words that we use that show that change has happened. And there are absolutely times where there's clients that want to change and can't, for whatever that reason is, with their path and where they're at and level of readiness.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what I noticed, and I would love to hear what your experience has been on this, is that the clients that were not able to change, right, or do the deeper work, tended to be afraid, just had like deep fear of actually deep connecting with themselves, which is interesting. And then also just getting fixed and stuck in a narrative, like this story, like over and over and over, whether it was the story of them being a victim and always hurt, and so always being vulnerable, and not knowing the difference of what it feels like to be empowered. So, it's kind of like there seems to be a fear that prevents the opening from happening, and then just stuck in the mind, the mind trap of how powerful our thoughts are in creating the reality of our sense of self, if that makes sense. So I'm going to pause for a moment, because I want to hear what your thoughts are, or what you think about the readiness of some of your clients, right, and where they're not able to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this conversation. I feel like there's definitely, I would call, a divine timing piece sometimes to change. My mom will joke with me that she'll say something to me 3 times, and then someone else will say it to me a 4th time, and then I finally hear it and create change. So sometimes it's about, is it the right, are you in the right relationship for the change to happen? Sometimes it's about the timing of it, right? Really being ready to create change. I'm thinking of an example of someone ready to leave their marriage, right? And that can take years for some people. And I can see it, and intuitively I can know what's going to happen. But if that person isn't ready for that, then there's just like, how do I hold space for this? And instead of the thing that we have to be careful of as mental health practitioners and in coaching is to never get attached to the outcome. And I love that the
Mm.
horses are not. The horses are not attached to the outcome. They love you no matter what. There's that kind of unconditional love and acceptance. Doesn't matter what you drive, but they want you to do what feels good because that's what they would do. That's how horses are set up, right? They're not set up to suffer, nor are we. But ultimately, we can't get attached to when or how change occurs. I think, or we can be manipulating basically outcome, and then we can even get frustrated. So I have
True.
a kind of an ideal client that I want to work with. And after doing this for 7 years, I'm a little more picky about who I actually work with, because I want to be working with people who are committed to change. That said, if
Mm-hmm.
people come, I can only meet them where they're at. Right, I can only
Right.
meet them with what they're ready for. And I agree. There's fear that comes in sometimes. There's self doubt. I find what's so great about the horses, though, is that we don't stay in the mental space that long, right? Like, we're not just telling a story and processing it over and over again. We're physically doing things with the horses, whether we're somatically touching them or moving with them, or we're actually, and we're outside in nature. So I find a lot of times people go, oh, I can't access that thing that was bugging me, right? And so they're getting a taste in the moment of what peace and freedom of, feels like, and then they want more of it. And so that's my whole thing, is like, can we actually grow those felt qualities that we want and embody them,
Mm-hmm.
rather than and being in that kind of heart space and the whole physical body space, which has so much for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that the horses do that. I don't think I do a lot of coaching without the horses, and it's great, it's effective, and I think it is on steroids when we add in the horses.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And definitely the concept of making sure that at least in mental health counseling, is that there's a therapist client has a good fit,
Yes.
right? Just a good enough fit. And it's so crucial, and they nail it in your head if you're wanting to become a social worker or a licensed professional counselor or LMFT, licensed certified family therapist or psychologist, right? They nail it in your head that it has to be a good fit. And you're like, what does that look like? I don't know what that means, right? But it's just about aligning who you are, right, as the leader of it, the practitioner, the guide, or the facilitator, that what you offer resonates and is appropriate for where they're
Totally.
at, right, with their needs. And just like for example, you mentioned a marriage ending, right? So it's kind of like dating, right? Not everyone was a good fit. At first, I feel that way. You get attracted, but then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't like the qualities, or we're just not meshing, and then you have to end the relationship.
Yeah.
So, but when you do get that good fit, it's magic happens. It's just boom. Just incredible to witness and to watch,
Mm-hmm.
to have, I guess, a shared lived experience of it, or shared common experience that you guys are both witnessing what's happening, and can both say, yes, that did
Mm-hmm.
happen. It
Totally.
wasn't just in your head, in your imagination. And so I think that makes perfect sense for your work, and doing it for 7 years, that as you've grown in maturity and wisdom and experience, that you're able to have more, a word that's coming, it doesn't sound very nice, just scrutiny,
Yeah,
but
discernment.
probably a nicer
Yeah,
word to that.
discernment.
What's that?
Discernment.
There
Yeah,
we
yeah,
go. That's perfect.
yeah.
That sounds so much
Yeah.
nicer.
Scrutiny. I get it.
Discernment sounds so much nicer than scrutiny. I
Yeah,
don't know about this person, but yeah,
totally.
precisely.
Well, and I always say, like, in this profession, we always want to help, right? We want to help everyone. And
True.
there are people that we can help more than others. So it's important to remember that. There are people we will enjoy helping more than others. And it's okay. Like, I find, like, the happiest practitioners are the ones that, like, love their clients. They're not
Yes.
drained by it by any way. And, there's a beautiful exchange of energy. I do believe that a lot of our clients, even if they don't go super great, are soul contracts. Like, they really are. We're going to learn from each other no matter what. And it's okay to also trigger clients at times because it can facilitate deeper growth. A lot of my coaches have triggered me. And I think that's can be a good thing as long as you have the maturity to be able to work through that and handle that and not just, jump out of a relationship because of that. And when you're talking, I'm also thinking and just fascinated by the fact that it's also sometimes certain horses are great fits for certain clients versus others. So I'm thinking of one of the horses I work with in Los Angeles, and she's so perfect for certain clients and takes them like leaps and bounds ahead. And then there's others where like, she's okay, she's good, but I honestly think maybe a different horse might be even better for that client. And so it is interesting also to see certain horses choose certain clients. I have 2 mares now that I work with, and they will sometimes choose the different, when a client come in, one will say, this is the client I want to work with more. And so there's an energy match there too, based on what we each teach, right? So I'm not necessarily someone that's always going to teach about, just like peace and quiet, although we get there. I'm not necessarily the mindfulness meditation teacher. Like I'm thinking of John Kabat Zinn. I hope I'm saying his name right.
You did.
But yeah, and so I'm not him, so to speak, right? Or like Eckhart Tolle as a teacher.
So you don't spend an hour choosing a raisin?
No, I do
Chewing
not.
on a raisin?
I do not sit in a room by
That's his
myself for
first
3
step,
hours.
right? Enjoy the raisins. Feel the raisins.
Yeah. And I'm not a Deepak. Like, I'm not a Deepak. I'm not going to get you just like the philosophizing, right? But like, am I empowerment? Can I light like a catalyst under you and get you to do something because you like lost your passion for it and now you have it again? Yes. Like, so, in knowing our each unique energy signature of what we really offer and what we're really good at and what we like dharmically do with people is important to know. So, I find that we need a team, really a team of teachers and a team of healers, because we go to different people for different things at different times. Like I have one healer that I go to when I have fears or phobias. Like she's the one I go to. I don't go to anyone else. So I think it's important that we know ourselves and we know what we need, right? And we experiment. We try different things too.
Absolutely. So I'm going to tease you for a minute here. So you don't mind being a trigger button?
Mm-mm. I used to hate triggering
people and lighting that fire.
I used to hate triggering people so much. Like I was like, oh no, I upset them. They're never going to work with me. And it was more about me. I was like, what if they leave? What if I don't, what if I don't make the money from this? And now I'm like, if I triggered you, I don't ever want to like really upset someone in the sense where they are going to leave a healing space and not ever come back in that space. But I want to get people to think enough. So what I usually will say is, I'll say is, do I have permission? Again, it's permission. Do I have permission to reflect something to you? Or do I have...
beautiful.
Yeah. Or do I have permission to go a little high flame, right? Or a little laser? Because what's funny is that I used to have a horse that was like, loved everyone. And now I have a horse that's very blunt and very direct. And she tells it like it is. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, like her energy is a lot for me. Like she's pushing my buttons. And then I realized that like part of what she's doing is to try to get me to get deeper into truth faster with people. So I'm not just like coddling anymore. And it's from a place of love. It's from a place of empowerment. It's not from a place of being right. It's really, and so I'm learning to be more like her. And it is making me be a little more direct and more blunt than maybe I was in the past. But we, as healers and professionals in this space, we're kind of always learning and growing, right? So like how I coached 3 years ago is very different than how I coach now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to come back to that part in just one moment about, how you are now compared to how you were when you were first doing it for 3 years. Is that I think I love that it sounds like for the most part are conscientious and kind and professional to ask permission before you pay them. Right, or like I'm going to flame up just a little bit here. Is that okay? Right, so you're kind of setting them up and letting them understand. But I think also it makes sense because your relationship with them is different than being just a best friend, right? And sometimes best friends do challenge, right? But for the most part, they're your cheerleader, right? They love you during all the stuff you go through, and they're there to support you. But you're there to help them grow and change. And in a lot of ways, we say, how can you expect to change if it's not uncomfortable?
Yes.
How, if you don't get outside of your comfort zone, then you're going to keep doing the same thing you've always been doing.
Totally. And
right?
I said that to a client earlier today. I said, enough of the comfy blanket. Like, and I said, what would it feel like to get, raw and naked and cold all of a sudden? And if you look at, and I'm not a huge fan of shocking the system all the time at all, but Tony Robbins, he does these cold showers, or he just gets his body to be able to be outside of his comfort zone so that he can create change faster, because a lot of us get very, very comfortable, and then we're in jobs we don't like or relationships we don't like for much longer than we need to be.
Absolutely.
And I do think that when people come to me, there is a lot of, they're not super happy with what's going on, right? Unless I'm doing coaching to get people's businesses to up level. But most of the time, the general public, they're in transition and they need support. So a lot of it is about self-compassion, and the horses show them the compassion. And it's also about, can we get real with ourselves? And what are we believing? To your point before about beliefs being so powerful, one of the belief systems that has changed my life the most is Louise Hay's, everyone's doing the best they can with the resources and information they have available to them, right? And so, and it doesn't take everyone off the hook, but what it does is it gives you a chance to first just come to a place of neutrality and acceptance. And then, instead of this, what you mentioned before, that victim consciousness, right? So-and-so should be different, or so-and-so should be better. And it's like, no, so-and-so's doing what they can. And, is this the best fit for you? Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Absolutely. And also, I just want to clarify to our audience and stuff. I'm not saying lightly that triggering people is a good thing, right? It's just I think it's so important that you mention that, and that you understand that, and respect the person's process with it, because it's very true that if you don't shift something that you're doing, then you're not going to get where you think you want to be. If that makes sense. It's like you have to be able to do the hard work. And so when I am doing an intake with the client for the first time, I'm very honest by now, right? I've doing this for 10 years. At first, I was a little scared intern. I didn't want to piss off anyone, right? I'm like, I don't know. I was so scared. But don't get mad at me. But now, we have confidence and things get different, and you can pick the clients you want to work with a little better. And so, but usually during my intake, I will say, one of the things I have to caution you about is that there are risks in therapy. And part of it is that this is going to stir shit up.
Yeah.
And you can just call me a shit disturber, because I'm going to stir some stuff up, and you may not like me. Or you may get upset, and change is messy and ugly and uncomfortable at times, and depressing and hard, and it doesn't always look pretty. It doesn't always look like what you probably. I'm trying to imagine like the beautiful change with like shimmery glowing lights, and this massive shift happens, and absolutely that happens too, right? But that doesn't always look that way yet. Right? Or it might come in a different form, because it has to feel that way and look that way for that paradigm to shift, right? Yeah. It's like you're rebuilding a new foundation, and so you have to break it a little bit. Sorry, it sounds terrible, but you have to shift it a little bit to be able to rebuild into more intentionality and directness, and manifest a new way of being, of what you're wanting. So it doesn't always feel comfortable, but the goal is for you to be able to feel better. That's how you know it's working. So you might feel bad, for a couple days or a week after, depending on what we're working on, but eventually you notice that the shift, that hard part is over, right? And then you're like, ooh, and then it's like the rainbows come out, and the birds chirp, and it's like this whole new world has emerged of this person. But
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
And it can happen fast too. Like I feel like because we are awakening and up leveling, we can get through change faster now than maybe we did a few years ago. And I love that. I love when things can be fast tracked because A, it saves money and time, and B, we want to have that awakening experience. But yeah, my hardest awakening was 3 days of crying in the practicum of my master's program, and like major stomach pain, and then I did, after, going into like the void of not feeling, of like going through all that intense emotion, doing the shadow work, which I think is huge,
Yes.
and getting it out, and then being in this void of like almost like nothingness, which was beautiful, and then feeling with like what my natural true energy is, which is love, unconditional love and acceptance and light. And I did walk out of the building seeing better, feeling like I could see things I never saw before, feeling totally connected. And I was blissed out for about 2 weeks after that experience. And everyone's like, what did you do? You're glowing. What happened? And it was a spiritual awakening. And I think, what's so neat is that the horses, I think, are gentle and loving and fun. So it's easy for people to do this work with them, if they trust it. And I've yet to not be triggered by a horse. All of my horses have triggered me, all of them. Almost all of them have made me cry. I've seen, I have clients show up sometimes just getting to the ranch and they're crying, walking out of the car. And, or the first time they see a horse, I don't know, I'm crying. And it's like stuff just gets surfaced. It's like, I kind of feel like you've got junk in this bottle and you're pouring clear, clean, pure water over it, which is the energy of horse and a great practitioner. And it's like, everything just comes up, bubbles over. So I love when you said a shit stirrer, because yes, it's that. It really is. And that it's so good. Like, I think the people who are seekers and who are dedicated to their personal and professional development, like, this doesn't scare them, and if it does scare you, that's fine too. Like, in the beginning, I was scared of all this stuff. I was an atheist. I was a scientist. I was not having conversations about spirituality at all. And I didn't want to do any of the shadow work in the beginning. I avoided it for a while, thinking I was fine. I was healthy. I was functional. I was better than others. And it was all ego. And, and thankfully I've had awakening experiences, because living with an ego that runs the show is absolutely exhausting, and that's not a life that anyone really wants to have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I think the pathway to, or the work to get to that moment of spiritual awakening, um, it is so important. I think it's also important for people to know that when you do this process, you don't have to do it alone.
Correct.
Right? Like, there's certain work that you kind of have to go private and kind of isolate in your own sanctuary to have that dormancy time and privacy to heal. But for the most part, especially when they're in a contract with you, right? Of like, you're my mentor, you're my guide, you're there to support them, right? And witness it and hold space for them. So they're not alone during the hard parts, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think that's
God,
so
yeah.
important to know that, and because you have experienced it, and you went from atheist to now full-blown spiritual, connected to all things, you know what that's like, and so you can witness it, right? And you can hold space for it.
Yeah. Yeah, in my master's program, we had a counselor and we had a neutral observer. So there was always two holding space for us as we were the clients and processing, and we were always processing real-time issues for 2 years. So I did a big deep dive in my own personal growth, and I use all those tools. And that's one of the things that I love. It's almost like I took that and brought it right out for myself, being the counselor, and the neutral observer to be the horse. And sometimes we switch and I'm the neutral observer and the horse is really the counselor. But that trio of energy that happens is super, super powerful, because you have all of that. And one of my favorite things to witness is, like, I'm there just holding space and the client is crying into the horse's shoulder, right? Or the client is having a conversation with the horse that I can't hear. Doesn't matter what they're saying, but they're able to use their voice and speak and get out what they need to with that horse, and that horse bearing witness. And that horse, I do find that our our best growth is really facilitated through angels, whether they're humans or horses or beings that we can't see. I do think that we do need the support, and it's worth spending the money on it, we don't need to go through things alone. I said that to someone just yesterday who's going through a huge life transition. I said, you can call me, you don't need to go through this alone. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and like the angelic realm, like Doreen Virtue angelic realm idea,
I mean,
or
I'm using angels
Christian
loosely in
angels.
this. I mean, I literally have that sitting right here because I was just doing
Oh
my
yeah,
card
oh yeah.
reading
Mine's on my
earlier
altar over
today.
there. Mhm.
Yeah. So yes, but also, I was in that way. I was using angels a little more loosely, and that just like the support of something very loving,
Gotcha.
and
Gotcha.
and also I should mention the biggest thing that we do in healing, in my mind, is really what's inside of us. So what the horse and the counselor or the coach is great. And ultimately the best healing truly is with our higher self, right?
Mhm.
Our intuition, our true nature, the part of us that is expansive and unconditionally loving, the soul energy, whatever you want to call it, spirit. And that's really, that's really where a lot of the healing, my master's program said, healing is the application of loving to the places inside that hurt. And that's really what's happening, is it's you with you. And then, these other pieces are reflections
Mhm.
of yourself.
Yes, and when you're healing at that level of the spirit, the changes that happen are faster,
Mm-hmm.
way faster. It's like being able to go from the inside really out,
Yes.
versus change from the mind and changing the body or the emotion. There's that. And then I like to say that you're communicating with people don't quite understand yet, is that that you're communicating with your soul through your emotions. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times
Mm-hmm.
our emotions are the language of the soul, and so you connect with your emotion, you connect really deep into there, and then you
Yeah.
can also connect more after that, more whole bodily, and you don't have to use the intensity of an emotion, but it's what's
Mm-hmm.
expressing, it's what's coming through, not your thoughts necessarily. Our thoughts don't
Yeah.
feel. They're just helping to describe and analyze and interpret and make sense of things. So I'm curious. So you've been kind of where you're at now for about past 7 years or so. Is that right? So, is there anything that you wish you would have known when you were first starting out
Mm-hmm. We could do a whole
in
podcast
horses
on just
and
that.
mhm,
There's so much. Yeah. I mean, when I first started, I really thought that I had a little bit of imposter syndrome, and I had a little bit, and I had a more negative voice than I was aware of. I would do a session, and then I would remember driving down the mountain for 7 minutes, kind of beating myself up, until one day I was like, took dominion and was like, stop, enough. Like, you're doing a great job. You're helping. And so I didn't know that doing my calling and my deepest soul's work would start to surface some really deeper doubts, fears, insecurities, because we're up leveling, right? Like, we're super up leveling and stretching. And so some of that stuff comes up with us. So I had to work within myself to do a lot of like more affirmation, acknowledgement work, prizing, and to believe in myself and to just keep going. And I did a lot of kind of bigger things in my practice without even realizing it in the beginning too. Like, one of my first workshops was like 30 corporate people that we got paid to do. And I hadn't really done much at that point. So I took the leap into this space. But it does take time to build a business. And I feel like there's a way to build a business where we're incrementally building and being smart about the way we build. So like, I went out in the beginning and I just wrote a book out of the bat, and I haven't published it yet, but it's there. And it was like, okay, I don't need to publish this until I have an audience. So let me go build an audience and then publish. So there's ways, I think, that to do things in business, and being an entrepreneur is hard, and we need community and we need support. We have to ask for support. I asked for my TEDx talk. That's how I got it. I think for me, there's a lot of learning around how to create a business that's sustainable. and learning business strategy and techniques. That was important because being an entrepreneur is very different than working for someone and getting a paycheck. It's a lot of discipline and a lot of resiliency and a lot of ways of moving forward and not taking things personally and, having to sell and market, but from a place of authenticity. So it's been a huge learning experience. And I do wish I had known that it would be a little bit harder than I thought, but it's definitely super fulfilling and I wouldn't change that.
Yeah. So it sounds like being able to, I don't know if it would be more no, maybe not confidence, but the things that you wish you knew before starting out, they would have helped understand better the last journeys or last part of your journey that you've been through.
Yeah, I think it's more like the logistics of things. I had to figure a lot out on my own, right? I had to figure out insurance on my own and like I didn't have a mentor on the business side. I just had to do it myself. And so for me, that's part of why I wanted to create the certification program for Awakening with Equines is I want to help people get there faster and not have to struggle as much or do a ton of research on their own where I can be like, here's processes and systems that I know work. They've tried and true. Take them, use them, and your success is going to grow faster than mine did, right? And then you're not going to also waste time and energy. Like in the beginning, I'm thinking, I wasn't charging, my worth, so to speak. I didn't know what to charge. People find that a lot. I find that a lot with new coaches. And even I was doing one-offs instead of packages. And so I always teach, my trainees like to really think about packages and because growth happens over time, right? Growth is a process. It's not an event. So people need to really commit and sign up for packages with a lot of this work. So there's a lot of things I've learned over time that I do wish I had more mentorship on for sure.
Okay, wonderful. And so, what are your thoughts now with the growth of the equine human services and assisted mental health coaching, learning about where it is now and your thoughts about it in general?
I feel like we've grown a lot in the last decade, and I think there's still a lot more growth to happen. You and I talked briefly before about research. I think there needs to be a lot more research that needs to happen for the field so that we can, especially for companies like corporate, for me to bring the horses into a team in corporate, they want to know how this impacts their bottom line, what's going to change, and they want to know the research. Same with some very specific mental health diagnoses. We want to be able to show the evidence-based research that things are happening and changing, and there isn't just a trust me with this work, right? So I think I'd love to see more research. I feel like I'd love to see more conversations around the welfare and being of horses, how often they should be working, how does this work impact them short and long term, emotionally, mentally, and physically. What is the kind of ideal amount of time for a client, to be doing this work. And I'd love to see the practitioners interact more with each other from a way where there's more collaboration and community. I think there's a lot of people who have very specific beliefs. And if you don't buy into that belief system, there's not space, so to speak. And I think there's a lot of ways of doing this that's so-and-so's way that you then take on as yours. And what I really feel needs to happen and why I also created the CERT program was I want people to feel like they can do themselves. They can be themselves, fully have their own unique gifts and partner with the horses and their unique gifts in a way that creates like something very unique and very specific to them. And so that they don't necessarily need to be in a box of how they offer their modality or their offering, that there's really freedom. And that does take more intuition. I think that's the biggest piece that while we need research and science around the equine assisted learning and therapy space and coaching space, we also need, I think, to be talking more about intuition and to be talking more about animal communication and horse welfare and all of that too. So there's a lot of room for growth.
Yes. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges to your profession, and especially being in more of the intuitive coaching learning realm that you may be noticing or facing today, or maybe in the future, next couple of years?
I think some of the challenges are people not always understanding what it is we do and people needing to explain it. And other practitioners sometimes have a hard time explaining it too. It's like, how do you learn trust from a horse, right? We go to this place of explaining horse as a prey animal, which is relevant and helpful. And there's also a lot more going on that it's hard to put words around energy. And it's hard to, I think sometimes it's also hard to teach intuition or energy modalities and healing. I think sometimes there's misnomers. People say equine therapy and sometimes go, well, are you working on the horses? Are you massaging them? And that is a whole field of equine therapy. But then we also call equine therapy doing therapy with humans, with horses present and as partners. But then we also can't, as coaches, aren't therapists, and we need to respect that because we did not do the schooling to be a certified or licensed health professional on the therapy side. So we can't call ourselves therapists, and we shouldn't be doing therapy either, right? So there's all these different pieces, but yet this work is deeply therapeutic and the emotions come up. And as you said, that's the soul language. So there's a lot of, I think, challenges around categorization, language, explaining, and we can't always do it from the headspace, but I do think that, there needs to be more clarity over time around how we present this and how we can collaborate. Because I find right now a lot of coaches are coming to me and they need horses to work with. And so there needs to be a way too where, like, horses who potentially could be given up on have this as their second chapter or last chance, so that they aren't going to slaughter, and the humans that need horses to partner with have access to them, right? So there's, I think, a lot of kind of matchmaking also that can happen in this field. And but the challenge, I think, for some people is they feel like they can't get started because of confidence issues, or they don't have access to horses. And my whole thing is, we'll do it. We'll get you access and we'll get you the confidence. If you're meant to do this work, just start and get the training you need so that you do feel like you can facilitate, meaningful sessions and healthy sessions, right?
Yeah, and I think that is such an important topic that you mentioned as a challenge, is for someone who wants to participate and learn to become a coach in your program, being able to have horses to be able to do that, and then also finding a good fit, right? Because maybe not all horses may be a good fit, and that is hard. And horses are very expensive and in remote areas, so definitely sounds like a challenge. Anything else you would like to share about that part?
I do think sometimes that if horse ownership doesn't, I do sometimes think about, and I saw post on this recently and I've been sitting with it, and I don't necessarily have like my ethos, my worldview on it yet, but it's how, when horses are too expensive for people to continue to do this work, and how does this work grow so that we can afford to keep horses, that we can help the horses thrive, we can rescue horses, and how do we do this in a financial world that is more challenging, right? And so I think about the economic piece, because it's not like having a dog or a cat. And I think about, so many people I know dream of having their own center or their own ranch, and I see these visions so quickly, and I have them myself. And then it's like, there's a difference between seeing that and the reality of it. So, I definitely have been thinking a lot about how do we mainstream this, and how do we keep it sustainable, and how do we keep it financially successful, so that we can do this work, and so that the horses benefit as well, and we can take good care of them.
Absolutely. I did a podcast interview a little bit ago, about a year ago, with Footfall and Footfalls with Sabra. And she was interviewing me about my dissertation work, which was on women veterans and equine psychotherapy. And I was advocating for the necessity of research, right, which you mentioned, right, being able to have evidence-based research. And I think the reason why it's so important to have either something like that, is because if you can ideally demonstrate that it works in a way that this very dominant, scientific paradigm wants to see, is that there will be more funding,
Right.
more dollars coming through, arguably, and then that allows more access. And so economically, the popularity and the growth of being able to do this work and it can't help but correlate with the need and the growth of horses again.
Right.
Right. And I think Path International did a survey recently about the horse and human services sector and how actually the last 10 years or so, there's been a massive reduction of horse population. And a lot of barns and facilities have closed down. And then even more so with COVID, right? Unfortunately, when COVID happened. And because the work that we do requires you most to be in person, right? You can do Zoom calls, for so long, and people try to be creative and adapt to that. But for the most part, the work is experiential and in person. So since that has happened, I think being able to demonstrate that it works in a way that people that hold the purse and dollars would be willing to help with that expanse. But then also, if we can theoretically tie it into supply and demand, so that if there was a high demand for, and this is just economics works this way, if there's a high demand for horses, then hopefully that will reduce the cost of horses and the cost of property and all of that. But because it's so rare and more of a, top 2% of people that have millions of dollars can own these millions of dollars of property, there's a low demand, the price is really high. So if we can increase the demand, hopefully it might lower the cost of them in general. Maybe totally theoretical, I don't know. But I think that would be nice. But if we can't do it just through research, there has to be other creative ways to be able to help with that and the sustainability aspect of it. Because so many people who do this work as facilitators of it have to form nonprofits where they get 60% of their funding from people with kind hearts and money, right, that donate or do scholarships and stuff. So, but yes, I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And so I hope that as you're helping to train and work with and inspire, certify practitioners, that will, have that trickle effect, right, that ripple effect of interconnectivity and help spread it and spread it and spread it. So then there's more and more and more capability, and it doesn't become just like an expensive niche hobby or something like that. We actually and make a living doing it, right?
No, and it can. That's my fear. Yeah, I saw both of the certification program that I received a couple years ago, and a lot of the other ones. They don't talk about business building skills. They're not talking about what to charge and how to set your business up. And to me, I'm like, we're not being, what's the word? It's not in integrity, but we're not being of service truly, really, if we can teach people how to be successful at this business, because it's about sustainability. So I see either two things. I see either people being in a hobby with it and they're not making enough money and they want to do more, but they can't for various reasons. And then, or there's people who have wait lists and are doing tons of stuff, but they're more doing riding programs or camps, but there's a huge need, but then they need to find ways to get support staff and, potentially start to get smarter about their offerings so that they're not depleted and drained. So on either side, I feel like there's either too much or not enough. And my whole thing is like, where do we get to a place where there's like really a good centering around this is the right amount of work for the horse and the human and sustainable, and it's a healthy program, right? And we're not overworked and depleted or underworked and upset, right? So that's what I spend time thinking about, and how do I set people up for success so that, and also that it works for their lifestyle. Maybe they do want to do this only a couple hours a week. That's totally fine. Right. But yeah, I don't want it to become where only a few people get to do this work. And it's, you have to have, have all the right resources, because that just doesn't feel fair. A lot, this is a calling, and if people are called to it, I want them to be able to have access to it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think arguably, or maybe inarguably, is that there is a marketing demand for people that need this work.
Totally.
Like in terms of mental health, for example, the demand hasn't gone down.
No, it's gotten
If
worse.
anything, it's gone massively up.
Exactly.
Like I've always had a caseload full, and it's hard for clients to find therapists in my area in Portland, Oregon. And then in the other areas of people receiving help and healing, there's a demand for that, I think. So I don't think it's that that's not available. It's just how can they afford to do what they need to get better, and how can you make a living to be able to afford what you do, right? And be able to do that. So I have one last question, and then we'll kind of close and end our wonderful chat today. And you had kind of mentioned a little earlier about your understanding of horses and them, in your experience and opinion, being a spiritual ally or a partner. And so I'm just wondering, what do you think it is about horses? Why horses? What is it about them that works or may not work? And we can just stick with equine coaching.
Yeah.
For example.
I mean, I could make it as short as because they're amazing, period. Or I could, because they're exactly, they rock for sure. They do. And, so I originally had a group called Equine Rock Stars, because they do rock. And, I love going to websites of practitioners, and they're like, they always have a page, why horses? And I'm always like, it's so fun, because people do ask this, and you can go into the whole science side of them being prey animals, and why would a prey animal partner with a predator animal, and all of that. You can go into the history and look at the fact that they've evolved alongside of us for so long and done so much with us as partners. Of course, it would make sense that there are awakening and personal growth partners now, like they've been our transportation and our war partners all along. You can look at a lot of different things. I mean, ultimately, I believe that all animals can be teachers and healers. All animals are here for themselves, and they're also here to be of service, that they embody ways of being that we can learn a lot from. And I find that a lot of people need the resonance of unconditional love and wisdom that sometimes has to come from outside of a human. I cannot get through to people the way I know a horse can, because being seen by, eyes the size of half my head is a different experience for people to really feel fully seen. And it's a game changer to have 1,200 pounds of fur and muscle in your face, really acknowledging you or being there for you, or putting their nose on your heart in the exact moment that you need it. Like, it's just a game changer. So horses are going to be very different from any other animal because of their size, and because of who they are, and because of how long they've been around us, and because of the fact that they are magical unicorns where we just can't see their horns, right? So ultimately, yes, I do believe they are our spiritual teachers and partners. They're here for that. People can disagree with me all they want. A horse is also still an equine and an animal, and has its own physical makeup in that sense. And it's different from ours. But those differences allow us to actually start to maybe question things and look at things differently. And it takes us out of what we said before, our comfort zone. And that is where the change really happens. And I love that. I love getting people outside and in this vulnerable place where they can then start to share and emote and feel heard and feel seen. And from that place, start to change.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And so I like hearing that. Pretty much everything you said. Love it. Agree with it.
There's a lot. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Oh, it's perfect. Oh, it's wonderful. And I know it's so hard to describe it all.
It is.
There's so much more you could say. Yeah. And I love hearing you say that they may have a purpose. right? Like we feel like we have a life purpose and we find it, it's like amazing, right? And so when we're able to help align with horses or an animal that may feel like and understand their purpose is to help with the healing, right? Then you have that good fit. And then you have, three people working towards a similar purpose, and then alignment obviously makes magic
Yeah.
happen.
Yes, and I think they're just at a higher vibration too. And I mean, I don't have scientific proof for that. What I have scientific proof for is their hearts are 5 times the size of ours, and that means their electromagnetic field is bigger. And I have proof that their guts are bigger and what that means, physically. But I do think that, you're just dealing, and their brains are different. So, but I really believe that their vibrations are just higher, and because of that, we can get ourselves into a higher states of consciousness around them. That's why I love meditating with them. I love just breathing with them. They are breathwork masters. They are meditation masters. And you don't need to talk about meditation. You just need to stand there for 5 minutes and do it with them. And that can change things. It can really regulate the parasympathetic nervous system, So,
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think HeartMath
yes.
Institute has been paralleling studies with horses and humans, and the trying to measure, right, the energy that happens with that. And there's other tools and things that people are using to try to transfer the experience into science understanding. And I read a book a long time ago about, an energy animal communicator, and she said unicorns are obviously real mythical beings. They become a unicorn in this description is a horse that's been ascended, and like they've reached their nirvana in their
Mm-hmm.
realm, and so their horn is actually the vibration of their third eye
Mm-hmm.
coming out so far, and that horn is very often used for healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we kind of think of it as a weapon, right? Like it was a Norway, that we think it's like
Mm-hmm.
long and solid, and they use it for force, sure, but it's that energy alignment that they're using that. So when people that have clairvoyant or psychic or intuitive spiritual gifts that can see creatures or beings at certain points, like if they're doing a reading, a little creature pops in, or they have dreams about them, they see the horn, but it's kind of glowing,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I thought that was
it
a
very
pretty
much
neat
is. Yeah.
interpretation of unicorns.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with all of that. And I do think it is that third eye is really powerful. There's stuff about the worldology and what you see on them and what that means too. And I have a tendency to attract and work with Pegasus type horses too, which is a whole nother topic. But yes, there's a lot there. And the donkeys are also powerful. We didn't talk about them, but I love working with them too. So I just think that people who are drawn to or feel like their spirit animal or power animal is a horse, if they have yet to try equine coaching or equine therapy, it's like don't walk, run, because there's something there for you if that energy is working with you. Because there's a lot for us in the space when we open up to their wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. And I think it's important. I think that's why we say equine, because it's
Yes.
including horses, mules, donkeys, and definitely the equid species is definitely, I think, in that family that we're
Yeah.
talking about. So even though it's a mule or a donkey or a mini donkey or something, doesn't mean that they may not have the same soul resonance of a horse. So any other last comments, closing comments, thoughts, words of wisdom you'd like to share today with our audience?
No, I find, it's been so great talking with you. And I find that there's a lot for people to consider as they go down this path as practitioners. And I find that you'll be an amazing resource for them from the research, from the podcast, and from the different offerings you have. And if people would love to get in touch with me, if they're interested in Awakening with Equines and certification, and then that's also the name of the Facebook group, happy to talk to people too. I find, I'm a big fan of helping them figure out what's a fit for them. And maybe there's a different certification program that's a fit if they're trying to do different things. But if there's a spiritual bent to someone's practice, I think people generally start to get attracted to some of the stuff that I'm putting out there. And there's more coming from people too in this space.
Wonderful. And Kate, what would be best contact info or best way for someone who is interested to reach out to you, maybe even participate in your certification programs or what you're offering? And what would be the best way to reach you?
Sure. I think right now it's probably best. So the Facebook group is Awakening with Equines, and both Instagram and Facebook are Kate Neligan Equine Coach. My website is currently consciousrockstar.com, but it will be changing to my name, and you'll have that forwarded over from that URL. And people can email or call when they find that contact information there.
Okay, wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today, Kate, and all that you shared. I learned so much today. I'm very excited for the work that you're doing and continuing to stay connected. I wish you well in your endeavors. Thank you for your work and all that you're doing to help those who are in need or learning how to help others who are in need.
Thank you.
Also, I would like to thank our listeners for being present with us today. If you would like to learn more about equine-assisted mental health treatment, equine-assisted coaching, learning, research, or about my nonprofit, Eudaimonia Equine Connections, Inc., and the programs we are offering, please visit our website at www.equine-connections.org. That's once again www.equine-connections.org. Thank you all. Hope you all have a blessed day, and may the force of the horse be with you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please click to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. And for all the show's notes and links, visit our website at equine-connections.org. For additional information, or if you would like to support this podcast show or Eudaimonia Equine Connections nonprofit programs with donations or sponsorship, or would like to be a featured guest on Dr. Rebecca's Let's Talk Horses, May the Force of the Horse Be With You podcast show, then please visit our website or email at info@equine-connections.org. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to have you here with us next time.